Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us. Not the normal, cheery tone that I normally carry at the introduction of this podcast, because right now I don't feel quite cheery. The U.S. U23 men fell 2-1 to Honduras on Sunday evening in the semifinal of the CONCACAF Men's Olympic Qualifying Tournament. This match was necessary to win for them to book a ticket to the Tokyo 2020 Olympics being held this July and August. And they failed to do that. I'm going to give you some of my thoughts on this situation, but I do want to first remind you to make sure to follow me on Twitter at SoccerForUsPod and subscribe to the show Soccer Down Here. To kind of talk about the U.S. men's national team program as a whole, including this U23 game and the friendlies that the U.S. senior men played last week, I'm going to bring on Rob Usry from Dirty South Soccer and Stars and Stripes FC later on as we kind of break down the good, the bad, and the ugly of all that happened last week. The U.S. men failed to qualify for the Olympics for the third time in a row, losing to Honduras in the semifinal again. This is a failure, and trying to spin it any other way is, quite honestly, a lie. However, this failure may be more on the micro level, at the local level, specific to just this team and this group of players, and probably more specifically to this coach, than it is an indictment of any sort of problems at the senior level. However, watching this team fail to qualify for the Olympics brought up some old memories and again showed the problems within the U.S. men's soccer program, as well as USSF as a whole. Am I frustrated with the U.S. men's national team program? Yes. Do I think this failure was avoidable? Probably. And do I think that certain decision makers screwed this up? Absolutely. This sucks, but this is not the same as previous Olympic qualifying failures. It's not the proverbial canary in the coal mine for the U.S. men's national team and their chances to go to Qatar 2022. This shouldn't affect this World Cup qualifying cycle. It's definitely not a reflection of the top-end talent in this U23 pool or the senior national team player pool as a whole. I don't even know if it's that detrimental to developing younger talent, because the talent that was playing and is going is not that young, and also not that likely to play a major role in the U.S. men's national team going forward. Even when you look at younger players, most of them weren't called in. Guys in MLS who are still developing, who are actually eligible for the next Olympics, include guys like George Bello, Gianluca Busio, Caden Clark. That type of player is still out there. And the guys who are in Guadalajara under Jason Kreis's leadership were unable to get the job done, but I still believe that they were good enough to get the job done, and that's the frustrating part. It's just another example of the men's national team failing when it mattered most. And it's really hard to build a winning culture if you don't win. For Berhalter, on the macro level, this was the first real chance to show a proof of concept of the new direction of the program, the new philosophy of men's soccer in the United States, and that failed. Is that Berhalter's fault? Not necessarily, and it's a little bit. It's a little bit Brian McBride's fault. It's a little bit Ernie Stewart's fault. It's a lot of bit Jason Kreis's fault. It's hard to blame the players when they weren't set up to succeed, but again, I do think that this group of players, individually, they were talented enough to qualify. However, at the end of the day, the blame is on Jason Kreis and whoever helped him choose this 20-man squad, because it was evident from the start that they would have issues in one very specific area, and that was creative midfields. And actually, they didn't have a lot of creative players in general on the team, let alone in the midfield. There were no real creative players, no one who could create something on their own. And when you have just a bunch of cogs in a machine for a soccer team, it's really not that efficient as you might think it could be. Again, I'm not sure if this is all on Jason Kreis. I'm putting a lot of the blame on Jason Kreis, but I think Brian McBride, the general manager of the USMNT program, and Ernie Stewart, the president or the manager of the USMNT and the USWNT program, I put this on them for not prioritizing this U23 age group and the Olympic qualification as much as they said they did. Maybe it's their fault for not just hiring Kreis in the first place, but keeping Kreis. Kreis was hired by Inter Miami to manage their Fort Lauderdale CF team. That's their USL League One team last year. At that point in time, Jason Kreis was the U23 coach. Now, last year, the tournament was canceled, so Kreis didn't have that job or those duties for the foreseeable future. But, it was clear that this was not taken as seriously as it should have been because you had a part-time coach who had another job. Kreis picked the squad horribly and set it up to have a very consistent problem throughout the tournament. He clearly didn't prepare this group of players well in January or March and the training camps leading up to the tournament. He had time and resources. I don't know if he had enough time or resources, and maybe that's something that we need to talk about. Maybe USSF should have tried to assemble more camps for this age group. That's not a Kreis issue. Maybe they should have tried to play some friendlies. That's not a Kreis issue. They didn't really train together all that much, and that's not necessarily a Kreis issue, this group specifically, because after the 2020 tournament was canceled with arguably a much talented, not even arguably, inarguably, a much more talented roster that was going to Guadalajara, he didn't have time to assemble guys and bring them in. But overall, it's just really, disappointing that USSF tells us this tournament matters, and then they don't really give it the time that it needs or the love that it needs, and then they fail, and then somehow the fans are made to look like the bad guys for overreacting. If they put in at the top level the time and effort into scouting and recruiting and identifying players who would fit well into the U23 squad, working with their clubs to make sure that they knew that they were identified for this Olympic, tournament, and clubs could prepare or be understanding, or you would have an answer about a club or an answer from a club early in advance. I don't want to harp on the Atlanta United thing. We'll talk about it with Rob, but, to an extent, that was not so much Atlanta United's fault that it was like a surprise to USSF. USSF should have known that. Like Jason Kreis and crew should have known before they even asked to have Miles Robinson, George Bello, and Brooks Lennon that it would have been a no. That's a mistake. I do have a solution, though. My solution is a very American solution. Throw money at the problem and hope it works. Specifically, I would like to see the U.S. host, on this side of the world, a U23 tournament every year or so. I think that's doable. You have a tournament in Florida. You've got Miami, you've got Orlando, you've got Bradenton. Host a tournament in Florida or California or Texas in the winter months. And put together your U23 team, invite Mexico, invite Honduras, invite Canada, invite Brazil, invite Argentina, whomever. Invite them for a friendly tournament, similar to how they do the She Believes Cup and Tournament of Nations. But I think USSF should host at least a biennial tournament for players in the age group of the upcoming Olympics. And I think that would go a long way into helping this program not only prioritize the Olympics, but develop squad cohesion much quicker. Anyway, it sucks. I'm disappointed. I feel like this was somewhat avoidable, but we have to move on. And we'll move on as Rob will remind me of the positive storylines from last week. He's going to join the show. I'm very glad that he's here to talk with me about the U.S. men's national team program as a whole, but very specifically about the two friendly wins that the U.S. had, a 4-1 win over Jamaica and a 2-1 win over Northern Ireland. So let's catch that interview on the flip side. Well, I'd like to bring on to this episode of Soccer for Us someone who is probably the most prolific content producer on the soccer internet. He is the editor for Dirty South Soccer and Stars and Stripes FC. It's Rob Usry. Rob, thanks for joining me to help me maybe talk me down a ledge that I'm on right now about our men's national team program.
Thanks for having me, Bart.
Now, I think you're in the camp that it's both frustrating that we did not qualify for the Olympics this time around, but you're more inspired and hopeful for what we saw earlier on that Sunday and earlier that week on the Thursday with the senior team doing well against Jamaica and beating Northern Ireland. Where do you stand just overall, a heat check on the U.S. men's national team program?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm in a bit of a unique position where I've experienced all three of the qualifying failures. I know we have a lot of new fans in the group, so maybe they haven't experienced what we have in the past of, going through this whole cycle of disappointment. But just having watched the national team ever since we've come out of lockdown, it's just been progressing into a great area, trending in directions we've never seen before. So it's just so hard to really get too down on the qualifying failure, just because I feel like we're lacking a little bit of nuance when we're analyzing this whole situation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little guilty of the lacking the nuance because I think I'm more just frustrated about the fact that we should be qualifying. And I really felt that the team, that even the 20 players who went down there still were good enough to get the job done. And it's just, I think for me, it's frustrating because I think a lot of fans feel like we should be able to do it no matter what. But taking a step back, you have to understand that the players that were down there in Guadalajara for the qualifying were not even, I don't even think most of them were a top 2 choice, even in this age group, let alone the full senior national team pool. But that said, you mentioned the kind of 2 previous failures we've had in qualifying. Why do you think that this one is so different from failing to miss out on or failing to go to the 2012 Olympics and the 2016 Olympics? What makes this particular case not as concerning?
Yeah, I kind of tweeted about this a little bit before the tournament even started, just because, honestly, when I saw the roster, I was not impressed at all. Like, I was like, this is the team really after, like, if you look back on the roster that was going to Mexico a year ago, it was just, like, infinitely better, just talent-wise. So my hopes weren't too high, so I had already, kind of built in a little bit of excuse, but I compared it to, 2012. If you look at that roster, we had guys like Breck Shea, Juan Agudelo. These guys were like, so hyped up. They were going to be the next U.S. national team superstars. And then when that failure happened, it was just like a punch to the stomach. Like, what this, Brian Scaretta, like one of the, everybody knows him. He's a great guy. He calls that generation the lost generation of U.S. soccer. And he's not wrong.
Yeah.
Because that, it was just so hyped. If you look at this roster, like, I can't even name one player on this roster. There's 20 that went to Mexico that I'm like, oh yeah, this guy's going to be a national team player for sure. Like Sam Vines, maybe. I can't really think of anybody. So these guys are like 5th, 6th, 7th, even not even listed on the depth chart for the national team right now. So I'm not worried in the slightest as far as going towards the future.
Yeah, I think that's the right take. I'm still frustrated by the fact that we didn't beat Honduras because you look at this roster and it's 20 guys, most of whom are starters, if not, just regular contributors in MLS, plus some guys who play in some pretty good leagues. So you would have thought that we would have been able to get the job done. What do you think the biggest issue was? Was it, was it a roster issue? Were the players not good enough? What was the issue with not being able to ultimately beat Honduras?
I'd say it's probably a split between the players just not having enough talent overall, and then the coaching aspect of it, of the whole system. Greg Berhalter has a very specific system with specific players, with wingers and attacking fullbacks, and 3 really talented midfielders who can keep the ball at under pressure and play out of danger. And that just wasn't a thing for this team. Like, they turned the ball. They turned the ball over at will, like just sloppy play all over the park. It was it almost felt like 3 years ago, that miserable feeling we all had as national team fans, where it's just I didn't want to watch this game, but thankfully we don't have too many of those days these days when we watch the senior team.
Yeah, I think if I want to be critical of anyone, I can't really be critical of the players on the field because they didn't perform at their best. I don't think anyone did, other than David Ochoa, and even he had a big gaffe. But you have to look at why was this roster assembled the way it was? And I think that falls to Jason Kreis, maybe a little bit to Greg Berhalter, probably a little bit more to guys like Brian McBride and Ernie Stewart. And I think for me, that's where I'm a little still not sold on the program being in the best spot or going in the best direction, because I look at this and say, the reason we failed wasn't because we didn't have good U23 players. We do. We know this. It felt more like it was a failure because of the guys in charge. Does that make sense?
I guess I'll let me pose this question to you. Outside, you keep saying, everybody keeps saying this roster was good enough, RK. But tell me a player who's a game-breaking player on this team who can take a game by the horns and you can make something happen out of nothing who's not relying on a team system to, score a goal. Like maybe Uli Yanez when he was on the roster, maybe that was a tough blow. I can't name one player who I had confidence in going into the lineup where I was like, he's going to make a difference. That's all I'm saying.
That's kind of where, again, I feel like the failure is on the person who assembled the roster, because I agree with you. You looked at this roster and you said there's not a whole lot of creative attacking talent. I thought maybe a guy like Soto or Ferreira up top would be able to do something, but even then, they're reliant on guys getting them the ball. I was hoping Salcedo and Mihailovic would be a little bit more industrious on their own right, but that didn't really play out throughout the tournament. So I guess to answer your question, no, I didn't think that there would be anyone on this roster who would be that supremely talented player. We did see Jackson Ewell take over a little bit in that Honduras game, so full props to him for doing that. But this team struggled to create chances throughout the tournament, and it struggled to play within the system. And ultimately...
If I could butt in just for a second, when we're talking about the whole roster, like, I understand the frustration of who he picked, but I fail to see, like, a glaring omission. Like, if he would have brought this guy in or this guy in, that would have been a huge difference. Like, people talk about Jeremy Obibisi. I don't know how to say his last name. I never have. But he's had plenty of chances on the international stage and hasn't really impressed. I just don't know who he could have brought in that would have made a ton of difference. I just don't have that feeling in me. And I would be honest if there was. I was really harsh on Bruce Arena. I thought he should have brought Tyler Adams to that, the last few qualifying games in that cycle.
Totally.
I believe 100% he should. That was a stupid decision. And now I would be honest if there was someone now that could have came in. But outside of European rosters or European teams not releasing guys, I just don't know who else could have came in and helped.
Right, and I think that's fair. I do think that there are a couple guys from MLS that personally I think would have helped. Maybe not so much in the creativity department, but I do think a guy like Keaton Parks would have been a good player in this midfield. I personally like Frankie Amaya and Cole Bassett. I think they would have added a little bit in the attack. But I think the overall trend is still, or the overall thought is that it's not like there is one player who would have made a big difference, but I think it's the type of players that would have helped, because in reality, it seemed like Christ didn't build this roster correctly. But we can move on from that, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It didn't happen.
No, I completely agree. I completely agree with your midfield takes. Like Parks and Amaya, I think are really talented, quality players, and I do think we missed that, confidence on the ball going forward and breaking those lines. I thought Ewell was okay, but he was. I mean, just Christ's usage of Ewell was really weird. So that's a whole nother topic from there. But
I know.
Outside of midfielders and defenders, I just don't know of that great game-breaking player, attacking player we could have brought in. So that's why I'm not too, upset about the whole roster selection process.
Well, I know you and I could talk for a while about the failures of Jason Christ as a coach, but we'll move on from that. And I'll ask you this. If you could pick one player from this Olympic tournament who impressed you and you think maybe not was on the radar beforehand, but is now on the radar for the full senior national team, who would that be?
Okay, if anyone out there is listening to this, the love U.S. prospects will probably get on to me. But I was never, a huge believer in Tanner Tessman, but he really impressed me, especially in against Honduras when he came on. He was, the best player on the field as soon as he walked on. His potential seems really high. I'm really excited for him to see how he progresses, and I think he could go on to be, a force in the U.S. national team going forward.
Yeah, I think the unfortunate part now is obviously these guys and others similar to them are not going to get that chance at the Olympic tournament. I don't know how many of these guys would have made a Nations League roster, period. I think some of these guys have a shot at the Gold Cup roster. I'll throw out David Ochoa. I was very high on Ochoa, but I think everyone being able to see him was great. And I do think I would like to see him, especially if it continues to play well for Real Salt Lake. I'd love to see him in that Gold Cup roster. I don't know if he'll necessarily play, but, I think he should get consideration for that. I think Jackson Ewell is part of the senior men's national team, whether we like it or not. I think he at least proved that he was probably the best midfielder that regularly played throughout the tournament. And that's not saying a whole lot, but, I think he proved that. And I think probably just for depth's sake, Sam Vines as a left back is in there because we need left backs. I just don't see anyone else on this roster that proved to me that they're ready to go play for the full senior national team, even though several of them have played under Berhalter before. And I think that is a little disappointing that no one even rose above the hey, look at me, I should be playing, pick me, Greg Berhalter. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. I do agree with you, especially with the whole 3 match days coming up with qualifying. I think he'll factor in, when we need to rest some guys. You bring up Sam Vines. He's a very interesting case. He was so impressive in the friendlies, but when the competitive tournament hit, I thought he was a bit of a letdown in this tournament. I'm gonna lie, he wasn't very clean on the ball. He was very shaky in defense and going forward for most of the part. He just really didn't. I had high expectations, and he kind of let me down.
We'll just blame Jason Christ for that.
Well, we'll blame Atlanta United for not releasing George
Right.
Bello.
So that's my next question. Why is this all Atlanta United's fault?
Oh man, that's just it's a very tough situation. It's where I agree with all sides. I understand exactly why Atlanta United didn't, because they have a brand new coach implementing a new system, have a important game coming up in exactly a week from now. We're recording on Tuesday. I don't know when this is going out, but anyways, it was a very tough situation. There's really no other way to say it. There's so many factors to consider, but I
definitely will say that I was upset with Atlanta United because I feel like this is somewhat of a continuation of their, no, we just don't want to send players for national duty. And I don't think that's beneficial to these players or for transferring them in the future. But besides that, I definitely think that Miles Robinson would have helped this roster. No, in the end, I don't think he would have kept us from, I don't think he would have helped us beat Honduras. But I think having Miles Robinson in this back line would have definitely made the team better. That doesn't necessarily mean that it changes the outcome of what happened.
Oh, yeah. Miles would have been a huge difference. Guys, I saw a lot of praise for Henry Kessler, but he may be a very smart tactical player, but this day and age you need pace, and this guy kept getting burned set 24/7. It was very frustrating to watch. The whole Atlanta United thing, it's just so many different philosophies, butting heads. Atlanta United wants to be this huge club, and they want to, they're treating their players just like a European team would. I understand it fully, but it's very hard. It's a very complicated place, as a national team fan and Atlanta United fan. So I understand both sides, honestly.
Yeah, I think you and I are a little. We want Atlanta. I guess my thought is I want Atlanta United players to perform well for the national team. So that's ultimately where my frustration or disappointment lies. But at the same time, I want them to do well for Atlanta United. So I'm not going to be mad if this helps the team here in Atlanta perform better. Let's transition, though, and talk about positive things, because we can talk about and go into a tailspin of the negative of not qualifying for the Olympics. But, the real reality, as you mentioned at the top of this, is these players who were playing in the Olympic tournament are not near the top of the depth chart for the full senior team. And in fact, for the full senior team who just played Jamaica and Northern Ireland, you had 14 guys, I think 15 guys total, who were on that squad who were U23 eligible. 13 of those guys played in the two friendlies that we just watched. So it's not like we don't have U23 depth. There were even more in this U23 age group that weren't called up because of COVID issues and weren't able to play for the senior team or the Olympic qualifier, specifically thinking Tyler Adams, Weston McKinney, Tim Weah. But you looked at the performance overall through this international window, the last real tune-up before we get to the Nations League window. What did you think about the 4-1 win over Jamaica, the 2-1 win over Northern Ireland, and just how the team performed during this window?
Yeah, I was really impressed, especially considering, the lack of midfielders on the roster outside of Yunus Musa. There wasn't really, that starting caliber midfielder that Berhalter would really require. Yeah. Tyler Adams, Weston McKinney, so on and so forth. but outside of that, I was really, I mean, I don't want to say overly impressed, but I was very satisfied with the progress in this camp, just because we got to see so many new players. Actually, I don't know if this is the right moment, but one guy I really wanted to spotlight, just kind of to bridge the gap between the U23s and this team, is a guy like Luca Della Torre. Like he's eligible for that team, but for the national team, he's probably not even guaranteed a roster on a 23-man roster in this camp. He came on in 2 games and was absolutely brilliant. I thought he had some brilliant touches going forward and was very positive. And just a guy like that is proof in the pudding of how deep our roster pool is and just how far we've come. So that's just one more reason why I'm not too disappointed about that failure. But overall, this camp, I was very impressed. We saw a lot of positive signs, especially from the striker pool. Like Josh Sargent was great against Jamaica.
Yeah, he was.
And then Jordan Ciabachu had some okay moments. He wasn't that impressive, but obviously Daryl DK, when he came on, he was a freaking lightning bolt. Like, if he didn't get unfortunately he didn't get his goal, but he made everyone want to see more of him, and that's exactly what you want from that battle for the striker spot.
Yeah, I think if you were to, I'm still a little anxious about our striker depth chart, just because I don't know who falls where. I think for me, it's definitely Josh Sargent as number 1, and I think he showed that against Jamaica. But even then, there are a lot of people who would point to the fact that his production isn't there at the national team level or whatever. But overall, I thought that from the forwards that we saw this window, they were pretty darn good. And I think that considering what we could evaluate from this window, that was one position that I think we got some answers, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, already mentioned, but Sargent and DK rose above everyone. I think they're the 2 guys competing until, the Grim Reaper Giassi Zardes comes back to life and, puts us all back on our level when the Gold Cup comes around. But who knows how that's going to play out. But I think just the overall depth is starting to improve. I don't think there's that one sure starter who's you can rely on, but they all bring something different. Sargent's more of a hold-up guy, intricate plays, making the dirty runs and doing the dirty work, while DK's more of a flashy guy who's going to get in behind and really makes it really exciting viewing. So there's so many options right now. It's very exciting.
There are a lot of options, but let's talk about the one position you mentioned that there just weren't a lot of options. I think we've all kind of had this underlying question that we don't really want to talk about, and that's what happens if we have to play without Tyler Adams. And then we had it even worse this window when we had to play without Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie. Do you think that we have an answer for what to do if Tyler Adams isn't in the 23-man squad for a World Cup qualifying window?
Forfeit. I don't know. I don't know the question. There is really no answer. He's so important for this team. Defensive midfielder, as a pure defensive midfielder in this pool is very lacking, especially when you consider people had so many high hopes for a guy like Johnny. He was miserable in that Olympic qualifying tournament, I thought. There's not too many options if Tyler Adams goes down. I guess you could always try and move Weston McKennie back there, but that's definitely not his best position.
Everyone points to that, and I guess for me, the problem with moving Weston McKennie to the 6 is it takes away from the natural aggressive style that he has all over the field, and I just don't want to do that.
Absolutely. I'm just thinking outside the
No, I agree with you.
Worst case scenario. we all know where this is heading. We all know when Tyler Adams gets hurt or he has to rest, the smoke is going to clear. Captain America is going to rip off his jersey, and Michael Bradley is going to walk out there, the conquering hero.
Well, so maybe that's a possibility. But the guy who got that tryout this window was Kellen Acosta. And I think a lot of people have feelings about Kellen Acosta. I am indifferent toward him. It's amazing to me that he's racked up so many caps at the senior level without really doing anything in his career. Do you think that he did anything to show you any sort of confidence in him that maybe if Tyler Adams isn't available, he can play that position?
Oh man, that is a very tough one. I think, worst case scenario against the middling CONCACAF team at home, sure, you could make the play that position. Definitely not on the road or against Mexico. I would, be shaking in my britches.
Yeah.
But as a body who needs to come in an emergency, sure. But outside of that, I don't have any confidence in him playing in an important role.
Yeah, I felt like he was up and down within the games, and from one game to another, I thought he, in most parts, he did well to connect play, but at the same time, he often gave the ball away or got dispossessed. Defensively, I thought he did well to at least track and try to cover, but he didn't do a good enough job of actually stopping anything. So it was like this weird, like, you technically did the thing, but if I was grading you, you'd get a C for all of it because you just completed the assignment.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think it's interesting the difference between the formations between Jamaica and Northern Ireland. I thought he did adequately well again in the 4-3-3, but when they moved to that the 3-5-2, when he was under pressure and had to really make some quick decision, that was when it was curtains for him. Like he stood out as probably the worst player on the field, and that was very glaring.
Yeah, I think I want to see maybe how he does in the Gold Cup, where it's a little bit more of I'll give him a little bit of credit in that, he's been in the camp a couple of times, but this is just a weird window. He didn't, I don't think you had anyone who was at full mental capacity to play. And that's no fault of their own. This has just been a weird, season. It's a March friendly where, guys like Christian Pulisic and even Gio Reyna and Josh Sargent are fighting in a league battle for some sort of position. Some of them it's to get into Champions League. Some of them it's to stay up. You've got a lot of people who this is not their primary focus. Kellen Acosta also is still in preseason mode. So I'm not going to cast him aside quite yet, but I'm not sold that he's the answer. But I also have to caveat with the fact that when you look at the CONCACAF World Cup qualifying schedule, you mentioned I don't want to see him against Mexico, and I agree with you. And this isn't overlooking the competition. This is just being real. I think that there are opportunities for him to play against teams that quite honestly are not at that same level. And I'm hoping that maybe he can prove that, especially in a Gold Cup, that he's able to play against teams like, a Nicaragua, El Salvador, even a Trinidad and Tobago, like those types of teams that we're going to possibly see in qualification that are definitely on a lower tier of quality.
Yeah, absolutely. I would put him in the same, I don't want to slight this other guy, but I would kind of put him in the same light as Jackson Ewell. Mm-hmm. Maybe, obviously not in the same, experience category, but just as far as pecking order, I think that battle in the Gold Cup, I think those two will have, a say in who's going to have it, higher on the depth chart. I can't really think of too many other defensive midfielders in MLS. Maybe I really can't think of who would be competing with those two for the Gold Cup. So I guess it's going to be those two competing, and whoever does better, I think, has the upper hand.
I mean, you mentioned Michael Bradley, but let's be real. Hopefully that's not it. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about the Jamaica game. We get a 4-1 win, goals by Serginho Dest, Brendan Aronson, and 2 from Sebastian Leggett. Jamaica does get a goal, but overall, I don't really feel like we were that threatened to, be in a chance to lose. Obviously, Jamaica was in a very tough spot with a very depleted and weakened roster. We weren't even sure they would have an ability to fill out an 18-man match day roster, let alone, put 11 good guys on the field. But when you look at the performance against Jamaica in a more traditional, what we've played, that 4-3-3, who stood out to you most?
Well, obviously it was Serginho Dest. It was just hilarious to me. I see everybody slating Greg Berhalter for playing him in that inverted left back spot, which I honestly, I like it. it just feels like he has so much more creativity over there. You can see the whole field from right there.
Yep.
It just, I don't know. I like it. It's unorthodox, but I think it works, and especially when you consider our right back depth, it's going to be an option going forward. And he proved in this game exactly why it's going to be an option, because he was outstanding.
Well, he was. That goal was fantastic, and I want to talk about that a little bit more. But let's shift over to that right side because, Brenton Cannon didn't have a great game. I'm a little concerned because, in theory, he's your best right back. I don't know if DeAndre Yedlin is there anymore. I'm not entirely sure, but if you're playing Dest on the left, then you have to put a guy like Cannon or Yedlin on the right. And Cannon didn't show that well in that position. Does that concern you any?
I mean, yes and no. I like that he did have a bad game. I'll admit that, but you can't really discount the last year. I thought he's been absolutely brilliant in the last year. Maybe his form has dipped a little bit, especially I don't know what his club form is. I just don't pay attention to the Portuguese league. I'm sorry.
He's playing. That's like at least half the battle, right? He's starting and playing most games.
But he's more of a defensive type of player. I don't really think he's an attacking type of player.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he's going to factor in. Like once he gets his confidence back, it's no problem. But I guess while we're still on the same page, I was actually really impressed with Brian Reynolds. Like his little cameo, it was very exciting going forward. Like he kept getting the ball, pushing it past the other fullback and or outside mid. I don't know what formation the other team was playing. I guess a 3 at the 5 at the back too. But he showed some really bright spots. So that that right back spot just keeps getting deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
I think that's why you're going to see Des moving over to the left more and more, just because there's really not a left back who's taking the reins.
Well, and I don't think we've seen a drop-off defensively on the left side when Serginho Dest was there either. I think that's what everyone's scared of. It's like, oh, well, defensively, blah, blah, blah. I don't think it's been a problem. Certainly not a problem when the guy can dispossess you and then create a counterattack all on his own.
It's such a weak mindset. Who cares about defense, bro? We're going forward. We got a new mindset. We're young. We're exciting. Who cares about defense? Let's go.
All gas, no brakes. Here we go. So, let's then also talk about the center back pairing, John Brooks, Aaron Long. I don't know how you feel, but I think that honestly, as much as no one wants to hear it, that's your number one starting center back pairing here for the U.S. men's national team, in my opinion.
Before these two friendlies, I would have disagreed very hardly just because I was so high on Chris Richards before this camp. Just because he's playing so well in Germany, and I'm just a huge fan of his technical ability and playing out of the back. I think that's a huge part. But he really let me down in these two games. I thought he was very shaky and definitely not ready to be penciled into the lineup yet. So I think Aaron Long definitely has a leg up. I was actually I don't want to be too critical just because of exactly what you said about this being a very weird window for everyone. But I thought Brooks had a abnormally bad game against Jamaica. Like he was misplacing passes all over the field and really looking a little bit shaky. I'm not going to worry. I was just thought I'd mention that as part of a little bit of analysis I had going on in my brain. But that's the way I saw it.
Yeah, I think for me, like you mentioned, it's concerning, but it's one game in the middle of March on a random field in Austria with a bunch of guys who had been together for 3 days. So I'm not going to put too much stock into one bad performance when a guy like Brooks has been solid at club and country for years now. I think that he had a weird game where he didn't complete as many passes as he should have. I'm just going to assume that most of those passes that he didn't complete is the other person's fault. I think that's just the fair assumption to make, right?
Yeah, that's fair. I think you're probably right as the center back pairing. I think Brooks and Long are probably the default formation or the default pairing as going forward. But I mean, it's going to be up in the air for the next year. Yeah. It's just going to be interesting to see how that plays out with all the competition going on.
Well, so we get the 4-1 win over Jamaica. We had a couple of subs come on that I felt really impacted the game. We can obviously talk about Brendan Aronson coming on for Christian Pulisic. I think Berhalter said he was only going to get 45 minutes anyway, so whatever. Aronson comes on in that left wing position, and I felt played really, really well. And I know the joke is, Paul Tenorio tweeted this, and he's like, the weird thing is that Brendan Aronson didn't become a good player until January 1st of this year. But like, there's even been a sharp uptick in his play and form and understanding since he got to Salzburg. I'm really excited with how well he's progressed since moving to Europe. What is your just overall take on Brendan Aronson for the U.S. men's national team?
I'm a huge Brendan Aronson fan. I thought he was awesome against Jamaica and looked pretty bright when he came on against Northern Ireland. But I think just his versatility and technical ability to play either wing position and can drop into the midfield is going to be huge for the national team. I think I tweeted this out after one of the matches. I don't remember. But I think just the fact that a guy like Brendan Aronson and his quality and his talent, I mean, he doesn't have a guaranteed spot in this starting lineup is just proof of how deep this player pool is getting and how exciting it is. So I'm a huge Brendan Aronson fan. I think he has a really good chance to maybe supplant a guy like, I don't know, probably going to cause a riot here, but maybe even Gio Reyna in the lineup, someone like that. It's going to be that competition for spots right now is going to be very heated, and that's very exciting.
I mean, let's be honest. I think we all know that Christian Pulisic is your starter. That's just a fact. There are three guys competing for whatever that other wing position is, and one of those wasn't here, Tim Weah. It's good to have this competition. It's good to have that level of quality of players competing for international spots.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even talking about Brendan Aronson, he could play like a midfielder spot, and you could maybe even take Yunus Musa's spot if he starts slipping. So you have all these quality players all over the field. We've never had this before, I don't think, as a national team.
No, I don't think we've had this many players who are that good being ready to play right now. Let's wrap up the Jamaica game. I mean, this is not necessarily the Jamaica team we will see in World Cup qualifying, but we will see them. I believe we see them in October 1st, if I'm not mistaken. Just what do you expect from this matchup when we see them in World Cup qualifying?
Yeah, I mean, they're a very interesting team considering, they have the whole work dispute going on right now. They have so many dual nationals and, irons in the fire in that regard. There's honestly no telling of what type of team we're going to see when we face them. If they have, if everything goes right and they have all their top players, it could be a very exciting team and a very dangerous threat for they're always a dangerous threat for the U.S. because they give them fits, but it could be even more so and maybe even a challenger to qualify for the World Cup.
Yeah, I think Jamaica has overtaken, obviously they in the actual seat rankings in FIFA, but I think Jamaica has more potential than Costa Rica does in this World Cup qualification cycle. But
that is an absolutely hot take right there. I would love to see some debates on some of the people I follow.
Yeah, well, I said potential. I'm not saying they're there yet. I'm saying potential. I think they could potentially be. I think they have as good a shot as Costa Rica to qualify for the World Cup this time. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, they have the talent for sure.
Yeah. So Jamaica, we get them on a 4-1 win in some random place in Austria that has now become like our European home. Kind of think that we should all just start supporting whatever club plays there just for the hell of it. But we move over then to Northern Ireland, go to Belfast to play a team that is right now in the middle of World Cup qualifying. This friendly against Northern Ireland was sandwiched between their matches against Italy and I forget who else it was, to be quite honest. I think they played a day. But, hey, look, you're playing a pretty decent European team. In fact, Northern Ireland and Jamaica are both like 47 and 44 in the rankings, I think. So, like, comparatively, they're about similar strength, I would say. I think Northern Ireland, this particular team, was stronger because of all the reasons you mentioned with Jamaica. But, just overall, we played this 3-back system, a 3-4-3. It looked a little weird, but we got a win. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I believe this was the first time that, Berhalter hasn't played his patented 4-3-3, and I thought it went fairly well considering that midfield that we've already talked about.
Yeah.
You have playing the two midfielders in a 3-4-3, like as we know as Atlanta United fans, is like playing with fire. It's just you have to have the perfect combo, and honestly, I don't think that was the combo to put out there, and obviously Acosta struggled mightily. But if you have a guy like Tyler Adams out there, maybe Weston McKennie.
Yep.
I don't know how you would finagle that with Yunus Musa and all that, but I think we have the talent to play that formation, and I think it would be very intriguing to see a full strength lineup in that formation, just because you're playing to your strengths. You're getting Dest involved in the attack. You have Anthony Robinson going forward, and that's his best attribute. So it kind of fits our strengths as a team. So I'd be interested to see how that works for a full strength lineup.
I think my overall take on the 3-4-3, especially just a 3-back system in general, is it definitely, especially a 3-4-3, takes away from what I think is our greatest strength, which is we have 3 guys in the central midfield who are phenomenal and will run over any CONCACAF team. I truly believe that, between Adams, McKinney, and Musa. Like, I think that's the best midfield trio that you're going to get in CONCACAF. But as we mentioned earlier, the question of what happens if Adams isn't available or McKinney isn't available, then I think that this 3-4-3 is the answer, because you can have kind of Musa or McKinney, or Musa and Adams, or McKinney and Adams, who can kind of play a little bit both ways. Adams obviously much more defensive of the 3, but they're able to do both the defensive and the offensive work because they're just so young and athletic and knowledgeable about where they need to be on the field. So I'm thinking that maybe this is that answer for what do we do when we don't have Tyler Adams in the lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's obviously the 4-3-3 is going to be your safe formation. It's working so well. There's no need to change it, but it's also very smart to have a backup plan and to use this type of game to work out the kinks in that. Like, it's so flexible. Even, if a guy like Pulisic or Reyna can't play, maybe you morph it into a 3-5-2 and have 2 strikers up top and someone in the dropping behind them, something like that. So it's always smart to have those contingencies when you have players missing. When we're going to have so many games coming up, there's obviously going to be players missing. So and then when you talk about a 3-back, you're talking about center backs, and we talked about Chris Richards. And if he gets more comfortable in the national team, he'll be a huge asset in the 3-back because he can spray the ball all over the field. Like, it just fits our strengths so much. So I think it's a great option to have in your back pocket when you need it.
Yeah, this would not be the 3 fullbacks or the center backs that I would want in a 3-back system. You had Ream, Miazga, Long. Long maybe wasn't the biggest issue. I thought, obviously distribution-wise he wasn't great, but like Miazga wasn't that great either. I thought that, again, if you were to have 3 center backs that you needed to start, I wouldn't have picked these 3, and I certainly would have put all 3 of these together.
Well, it just came to me. It just came to me now. Actually, a perfect 3 center back. If you don't mind me, just
absolutely go ahead.
You have John Brooks on the left. He can spray passes.
Yep.
Chris Richards on the right. He can obviously distribute the ball, and have Miles Robinson in that center back spot, chasing down mistakes and covering all kinds of ground. That would be the ideal 3 center backs, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, look, we're going to make this allusion to Atlanta United a bit, but you think about what the best 3-back system for Atlanta United was at one time, and it was LGP, Robinson, and Escobar for that same reason. So I think that, Richards and Brooks as your kind of outside center backs, and having Robinson as that center back would be a great combination. I think that would have made this particular formation flow a lot better. The other problem I had with this formation, and this was both the, I'm okay to see this because it's fun, and this is not going to be good because it doesn't really make our attack flow that well, was Serginho Dest really coming inside and being almost like an attacking midfielder. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for Serginho Dest having the ball anywhere on the field because fun things will happen. But it didn't make the formation work as well as it could have. We had a lot of crowding right on top of the 18, and it really didn't make us look that efficient on offense. But I thought, honestly, when Dest came out and we had Brian Reynolds come in, he stayed wide, and I thought that the formation looked better. That's not an attack on Dest because, again, give Serginho Dest the ball and just see what happens. It's going to be fun. But maybe that's something that we need to take from this game and again, kind of teach. And maybe that's the takeaway for Berhalter about what the system does.
No, I totally agree. Like you mentioned, when Reynolds came on, it looked more like a traditional wide formation, and it worked the way it did. And I think that's a testament to Dest and how he loves to get on the ball and make things happen and create and go in the middle. And I think that's why he's so suited for that inverted left back spot because he can work with that winger. When he comes inside, the winger can go wide, and they have a good understanding. So when Des was in that spot where he had to stay wide, when he came in, it just kind of shrunk the formation and kind of made it a little bit ineffective going forward. But I think it's a fine option to have, and whether it's Dest on one wing or the other, I think it's fine to have in your back pocket.
Yeah, I mean, Serginho Dest being on the field is what I think Berhalter needs to try to do. That how he does that is up to him, but let's just make sure that he's being able to work efficiently with the rest of the guys. And that was the only critique I really had of the system, because other than that, it's really hard to be super critical of a system that you haven't really played before. And I know that the broadcast joked that they had only played like 8-10 minutes together, or trained 8 or 10 minutes together. I doubt that that's actually true, knowing how Berhalter both talks to his guys and trains and prepares. But look, you tried it in a friendly. It wasn't terrible. Like, I don't think you could look at that and say, wow, we looked really bad. You were also playing a pretty okay team in Northern Ireland. And the goal you gave up wasn't a problem, I don't think, of the system. It was a problem of miscommunication between the two center backs, and a fantastic hit from an attacker. So I don't want to criticize it too heavily, because I thought it was okay. I'd like to at least see Berhalter try it once more in a friendly before I make a real statement on how I feel about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just want to see a full strength lineup, especially in the midfield, because that's such an important part of the formation. Give me Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie in that double pivot, or whatever you want to call it, and let's see how it works with that, and then make a determination.
So overall, this entire window, what was your favorite moment that you saw from the U.S. men's national team?
Oh man, that is tough. Favorite moment? I mean, it's kind of hard to beat this goal.
It was amazing.
That was a brilliant strike. But I mean, honestly, when Daryl DK came on, it was like we had discovered gold. I mean,
yeah,
he didn't score, but just the potential he possesses, and just all of his qualities. The potential is honestly, astronomical. What he could do for this team if he gets acclimated and gets more chemistry with the guys and gets more understanding in the role. I just want to see him get 3 or 4 games in a row as a starter and a fair chance. And I think he'll start banging in the goals left and right. And I can't wait for that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I, for one, think he should definitely not come back to Orlando City. I think that is definitely best for his career and my mental health.
Absolutely.
I do want to talk about something that I have found a trend. It's been rather recently. It was just in this window, and it's including the two matches we played at the senior level, the match against Jamaica, the match against Northern Ireland, and that match against Honduras. And it's this. I think that these players have been drilled into capital T, capital S, the system, trademark, whatever. But we're starting to finally see players find individual moments of creativity and freedom within the system, which is now, they're comfortable there. They're finally able to know what they need to do and what they can do outside of that system. And we've seen that in three very specific goals that were scored during this past week. The Serginho Dest goal was not a product necessarily of the system, right? That is Serginho Dest being a very talented soccer player and being able to beat guys on the dribble and recognize how to take and finish a superb shot from distance. Gio Reyna is a very similar goal where, it's lucky he got a deflection, but at the end, honestly, he got a pass, he got open, and he took a shot. It wasn't, necessarily a system buildup of play. That's necessarily specifically to this Berhalter system. It's just a product of soccer playing. And then even that Jackson Ewell goal that he scored against Honduras was a moment of individual brilliance. And I'm glad we're starting to see that, because as much as the system is supposed to produce goal-scoring opportunities, that's the theory, right? That this positional play and this passing and progressive passing philosophy will create attacking chances and hopefully lead to goals. When you get into World Cup qualifying, when you get into late rounds of a tournament, you need individual players to step up and be special and create something magical. And I'm glad we're finally starting to see that. And to me, that was that Serginho Dest goal immediately. I was like, that's what we need to see. A guy who knew how to work the system, then break out of the system and make something special happen for himself and the team.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. That's honestly what soccer's all about, is those special individual moments. Obviously the ideal for any team is to play beautiful, attacking, flowing soccer and the system working beautiful. But that's not always the case. You always need someone to come up with, or you're usually going to need someone to come up with something brilliant in the blink of an eye. And to have players of that quality capable of doing that every once in a while is something we really haven't had a ton, except for outside of Clinton Dempsey and Landon Donovan. Every once in a while, even then they weren't doing it consistently, but they had that in their locker. And to have more and more of those types of players capable of doing that is very exciting.
So the last question I have, it's not really a question, it's more of a prompt, but it's open-ended, so feel free to take it however you want. Yunus Musah.
I love him. I want to clone him and have a team of 11 of them.
He's really good.
He is a brilliant soccer player. I can't believe we have him. It's like being gifted a Christmas present, that you couldn't even possibly imagined. It's like you see all these conspiracy theories about constructing a World Cup roster 4 years from now, and this kid coming out of nowhere and becoming this world star. I'm not calling Yunus Musah a world star, but he has, elite type of potential.
He really does.
And even right now, as an 18-year-old player, he's just people keep making this comparison. I don't want to put that on him yet because I think so highly of this player, but he does have Darlington Nagby qualities.
Who's your favorite soccer player to ever play, right?
Yes, without a doubt. Just his quality on the ball, his understanding of the game, the nuances in midfield to open his body and create space when he sees a defender or open space. It's just out of this world, and the potential is out of this world, and I can't wait to see him in more in the full strength lineup and in competitive matches. Is going to be so much fun.
Well, I'm very excited for Yunus Musah. He's officially cap tied to the U.S. because he's played 4 times for the senior national team. So that means he's ours. We get to keep him. We get to bring him home, all that good stuff. We hopefully will see Musah and the rest of most of this squad that we saw at the Nations League final in June. Obviously, we have a warm-up against Switzerland on May 30th, and then we come back to the States to play the Nations League semifinal on June 3rd, and then hopefully the final on June 6th. I have heard it's going to be in Chicago. That's where Victor Montagnani said it would be. I haven't seen that officially confirmed, but I think if the president of CONCACAF says it, it's a safe bet that it'll probably be there. That said, I just want to know how you feel about this men's national team going into the Nations League final, which is probably a better test of this squad's capability than anything we've seen in the past, since the 2019 Gold Cup final. So it'll be a really interesting benchmark. How do you feel about this team right now?
I am as confident about this team as I have been since maybe 2013, 2014, when we had their brilliant run with, Fabian Johnson and Josie Altidore scoring all those amazing goals. That team felt like it was unstoppable at that time, and I don't want to put that kind of pressure on this team, but it does feel like they have that understanding. Everything is just working, like chemistry-wise, on and off the field. Everyone's having fun. Everyone loves each other. It just feels like this team is, what we've been waiting for, and it's so exciting. I can't believe I'm even saying this 3 years removed from, being so depressed as a U.S. national team fan. It's just maybe it's an overcorrection. Maybe we're overhyping everything just because it's not terrible, but it really feels like something special is happening right now.
I'll take not terrible, to be quite honest.
Absolutely.
Well, Rob, thanks for joining me on this episode of Soccer for Us. Where can we follow you and find your work?
Yeah, follow me on Twitter at Rob Usry, and then find my work at Dirty South Soccer and Stars and Stripes, depending on your poison of soccer team affiliation.
And the last question before we get out of here is over under 50 points for Atlanta United this season.
Over.
Okay, I love it. All right, we're going hard. I will caveat this. We don't even know that we'll finish the whole 34-match season. Let's hope we do. But I like that. We'll go over 50 points. I love it.
Absolutely. I don't know what even 50 points would entail in as far as historic goes, but I'm going over because I'm so optimistic.
I love
Over
it.
100 points. I don't even know. Let's go.
We're go. All right, Atlanta United, the Centurions. That's happening this year in MLS. We got it. There we go. Well, Rob, thanks for joining me again, and I will appreciate your time and hope to talk with you about U.S. men's national team things in the future.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Thanks again to Rob for joining this episode of Soccer for Us. I'm feeling very more optimistic after talking to him because it's hard to look at what we saw from the U.S. men's national team on the field last week at the senior level, beating Jamaica 4-1, looking pretty dominant, and then going and getting a win 2-1 over Northern Ireland, the first win over European competitions since like 2015. That's pretty awesome. So positives for the U.S. men's national team program. Before we depart, I do have some U.S. soccer news. First, let's talk about the U.S. Open Cup format. 16 teams will only be allowed to compete. Obviously, this is a disappointment for anyone who wanted to compete in the U.S. Open Cup, but I think it just makes sense at this point in time with there still being travel and COVID restrictions. So 16 teams will be allowed in, 8 MLS teams decided by the average points per game amassed through the first week of the season. 4 USL championship teams, the 4 semifinalists from last year. So that's El Paso Locomotive, Louisville City FC, Phoenix Rising, and Tampa Bay Rowdies. 2 teams from the D3 level, that's the NISA champion Detroit City and the USL League One champion Greenville Triumph. And 2 from the open slots. They will be randomly drawn from the amateur teams who compete the NPSL and USL League 2. So 16 teams in a knockout format for the US Open Cup 2021. Also, there's still no definitive word on where the Nations League Finals or Gold Cup tournament as a whole will take place. In early February/late January, CONCACAF President Victor Montalniani said in an interview that the Nation League Finals would be held in Chicago, specifically at SeatGeek Stadium in Bridgeview and then Soldier Field in Chicago. That has been said that one time, and it hasn't really been confirmed or stated anywhere on CONCACAF's website. So it's still up in the air if that is true. Last year, it was Houston and Dallas who were supposed to host the semifinal and finals. Still no word if that's happening in Chicago, if that's happening in Texas. It's also been rumored that it could be Denver. So no clue where the Nations League finals will be. He did also say that Gold Cup final would be in Las Vegas, Nevada at their brand new stadium. So I'm actually excited. I hope that it's there. I'd love to go to that stadium and see it and see Vegas. None of this is confirmed. We don't know any other Gold Cup locations, but just wanted to keep you an update on that because I've actually had people ask me about that. Again, thanks for listening to this episode of Soccer for Us. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Soccer for Us Pod and subscribe to the show on whichever podcatcher you are listening right now. Again, thanks for listening. I'm Bart Keeler. I'm out.